Hey there, guys. John here for one of my really infrequent video blogs that I wanted to put up. And the thing I'm putting my video blog up about today is to respond to an article that was written about me by a gentleman by the name of Cameron Cloutier. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing the name, my Canadian French background. Cloutier. It might be Cloutier, but I believe it's Cameron Cloutier. And first of all, I find it really weird and maybe a little flattering and a little uncomfortable that there is somebody out there who thinks I'm important enough to write an article about on their website. So I don't know how to respond to that, but okay. And Cameron wrote an article about me that it was pretty damning and pretty harsh. And that's fair and that's fine because you know what? I think whenever you write a blog post or write a Facebook post or make a YouTube video, you're putting yourself out there. And when you put yourself out there, that means you're opening yourself up to criticism. And you got to be, willing to expect that if people want you to give your opinion on something, then there are also going to be people, trolls and non-trolls, who are going to be willing to jump all over you for your opinion and what you do and what you say. And I always tell my staff, them, look, just ignore that stuff because you're never going to make everybody happy. And I'm kind of breaking my own rule a little bit, but there are some issues that Cameron brought up in his article. Sir, I'm talking to you, Cameron, that you brought up in your article that are your opinion, and that's fair. And criticism that you levy against me. And while I may disagree with you, it is fair for you to have that opinion and to level that criticism, and that's what you so choose. But the reason I wanted to make this response video is because you raised several other issues that, frankly, are flat out deceptive, wrong, inaccurate, and in some case actively deceptive, like lies. And I'm going to choose to believe that motive wasn't to lie, but just rather maybe you had wrong information and maybe you just, aren't experienced enough as a writer or whatever to know that when you write things a certain way, it comes off a certain way. And I want to address those issues. First, in the article that Cameron wrote, he really criticized heavily the format of my show, AMC Movie Talk. Really criticizing the fact that we don't talk more about independent films or foreign films, that we mainly focus on almost 100%, probably 98% focus on wide release films. And that's a fair thing. I mean, I disagree with you about that being a bad thing, but that's a fair criticism because it's true. We do focus on that. But I've always believed, going back to when I started the first movie podcast. It was called AMC Audio Edition. Or no, it was called not AMC. It was called the Movie Blog Audio Edition. And I believe we were the first movie podcast. I believe that if you try to make a show for everybody, you'll wind up satisfying nobody. I mean, that's a cheesy cliche. I understand that. But it's true. I believe if you try to make a show that appeals to everyone, then you'll wind up satisfying no one. And that's why I think some of the best like movie podcasts and things out there are like ones that focus on genre-specific films. There are shows just about documentaries. There are shows just about, Korean films. There are shows just about small independent films. And those are great because, they really focus on what their target is. And as AMC Theaters, doing a show for AMC Theaters, then I try to do a show that basically mostly focuses on films that are going to be wide release where most people can watch it. I mean, because if I did, if I do a topic on a film, a small independent film, say, that is just opening up in like 20 theaters or 8 theaters across the country, then I'm instantly alienating 95% of my audience because it's not playing in a theater near them. Me talking about it right now has no impact on them. And so that's why I choose to do that. But if you believe that's the wrong approach, then that's fair. I mean, that's cool that you have that opinion, and I disagree, but disagreeing is where all the fun comes from, being film fans. So I just wanted to point that out. And, there's some other things you point out about me that are pretty harsh, but they're opinion based. And therefore I can't say that you shouldn't have your opinion. You should, and you're allowed to have them. And there you go. But there are some things in your article that I got to address. Number one, first of all, is this really National Enquirer, shock sizzle headline you wrote. Did John Campea cost Jaimie Alexander the Wonder Woman role? Dude, that's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. And one of the things here is the problem with your whole thesis here was that you're operating on an unproven, unverified assumption. You're assuming that Jaimie Alexander told me, something I never said, told me that she was going to be Wonder Woman. And therefore, the fact that I let people know that, hey, Jaimie Alexander told me something really incredible backstage, but I didn't reveal what it was, you're making the assumption that it was Wonder Woman. And then therefore, you wrote this whole piece on the assumption that she was talking to me about Wonder Woman. And then that somehow me telling people that she told me something cost her the job. Well, I mean, let's look at the facts. You point out yourself in the article that Jaimie got on stage herself and said publicly to everybody at our panel, I have been talking to Warner Brothers about this and I know all the details of the Batman Superman movie. That was her saying that publicly. Publicly. Me just saying that, hey, she told me something backstage to blow her socks off. Look, I'll tell you right now, Jaimie Alexander did not tell me she was going to be Wonder Woman. I mean, I can say that now because it's public that, she's not Wonder Woman. But I mean, I wasn't going to tell people what she said. But anyway, so there's some inconsistency. You operated on an assumption and then wrote as fact something based on your assumption. And it doesn't work. And plus, it makes no sense because she got up publicly in front of an audience and said, I've been talking to Warner Brothers and I know all the details about Batman Superman. She did that in front of a public audience. Me then saying, hey, she told me something pretty cool. I can't tell you what it is, but she told me something. Wow. No. So that just doesn't make any sense. But then you go on to say, you pulled up this tweet from me from about 4 or 5 years ago. And you said, this isn't the first time John Campea shared privileged, you used the word privileged information. And you put up this tweet I put up like 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. Because I got told and I learned a really valuable life lesson in this. I got told about 4 or 5 years ago by somebody who worked at a studio that Adrian Brody was going to be Ant-Man. And when I asked them about it, I said, can I run with that? And they just said, hey, tell whoever you want, but just don't mention my name. So I tweeted, hey, take this for what it's worth, because I didn't know if it was true. I said, take this for what it's worth, but I was just told that Adrian Brody was going to be Ant-Man. Now, notice what else you did there. You lied inadvertently. I don't think you meant to lie, Cameron. But you said, John shared privileged information. Well, once again, you formed an assumption in your head that somebody told me something and swore me to secrecy, and then I went out and told everybody anyway. That's not the case. Somebody told me something, cool to share, just don't mention their name. And so I did. I shared what I was told, and I learned a valuable lesson about that because it turns out what I was told was completely wrong. Edgar Wright himself emailed me and said, John, not true. And then I believe he was on my panel at Comic-Con, and he reminded me that wasn't true. And I learned a very valuable lesson that day about making triple sure things are actually true before running things as scoops. And if you'll notice, really, since that time, I don't run scoops because I hate the idea of feeding wrong information. And that day I fed wrong information. I mean, no, you told people that I share privileged information. Number one, Jaimie Alexander didn't tell me to not say anything to anybody, and I didn't even reveal what she told me. I just said she told me something pretty cool. That's it. The second thing, you said I shared privileged information by revealing that I was told that Adrian Brody was going to be Ant-Man. Once again, you're wrong. That's incorrect. It was not privileged information. The person at the studio told me, just asked me to leave their name out of it, but I was free to tell people, and I did. And bad me, because I should have doubled and triple checked those facts before I put it on my Twitter. And since then, I'm out of the scoop running game. At least I try to be. It's just a bad mess. Anyway, I learned a very, very valuable lesson that day. So yeah, there's the whole Jaimie Alexander thing. You also said some very interesting things in your article about my staff. And just between you and me, Cameron, I'm willing to pull out my wallet and have a pre-1990s movie trivia or movie knowledge test between you and Amy Rose Eisenbach. I feel pretty good about my money putting on Amy Rose. I'm just going to say that. But that being said, you said I inadvertently outed my staff member, Chris Lee Kennedy, revealing that she was a lesbian online. So once again, you wrote your article in such a way to try to make me look like an idiot. And trust me, Cameron, I do enough things to make myself look like an idiot that I don't need other people saying incorrect things to help me. All right. But the fact of the matter is, Chrysa Lee, if anybody Googles Chrysa Lee, she's very public about who she is. She's very public about her sexuality. She's very public about her relationships. I did not out anybody. But the way you wrote this article, John even outed his own staff person. Dude, just the way you wrote that. I mean, it's deceptive the way you wrote that because it's not true. I didn't out anybody. She's very public. I didn't out her. And maybe there were people who were watching the show that day who didn't know, but it was public information that Chris Lee's very upfront about. So I did not out Chris Lee. The other thing I want to address here is something you did that was really deceptive, dude. This thing about Clark Wolf. Now, Clark Wolf was somebody who worked with me at AMC Movie Talk, and I did let her go at one point, and she may be back at some point. Clark may be back at some point, but that's neither here nor there. But you wrote your article in such a way, just look at the way you wrote it, dude. You wrote it's like, she disagreed with John because she gave Man of Steel a negative review, and that's one of John's favorite movies of the year, and shortly thereafter, she was let go. Okay, dude, you saw what you did, right? You are implying very directly, I mean, you're not even masking it, that I fired Clark Wolf because she disagreed with me about Man of Steel. Dude, if you know anything about me, there have been shows where afterwards I will say to guys on the show, dude, it's entertaining when we debate. Somebody disagree with me. I mean, don't lie. If you and I share the same opinion on something, don't lie and pretend you don't agree with me. But come on, don't be afraid to engage in debate. It makes it more entertaining for everybody. I believe that, the most fun part about being a film fan is that we get to disagree and we have our debates and our exchanges. And that's as long as we all do it respectfully. I mean, that's the best part about being a film fan. But you wrote your article in such a way. I said, you made this big thing. Clark Wolf disagreed about John about Man of Steel, and shortly thereafter, she was fired. And then John didn't say anything about it. Okay, well, first of all, it depends on what your definition of shortly after. Because you make it sound like the next day. Clark was still with us for another 4.5 weeks after that Man of Steel review, which, by the way, I loved her responses in the Man of Steel review. I love that there was a dissenting voice on the panel. But you write it as if, 2 or 3 days later, she got fired. That's the way it comes across. That's the implication. It was 4.5 weeks later. I believe we did the Man of Steel review on like June 14th, and she was with us until like the end of July. Huge thing. And as far as your whole thing about, well, John, why didn't you tell people why you let her go? Well, because that's Clark's business. That's not your business. If Clark feels that she wants to share with everybody what happened, that's her prerogative, and she can do that. That is not my place to make that decision, and it's not your business to know. Like with your job at Burger King or Bank of America or the local hospital, if you lost your job, it's not like the public has a right to know. Your boss should get on a blog and tell people why, you're not with them anymore. That's completely inappropriate. And so your deceptive writing, trying to suggest I let go of Clark Wolf because she disagreed with me about Man of Steel, and that somehow it happened right after it, is just factually incorrect. And it was very deceptively written the way you did that. But anyway, so let me move on. Oh, then there's this other part. You suggest that I broke state law because we had a role on our show for a female host. And so I got on my Twitter, my Facebook, and I said, hey guys, I'm looking for a female host, blah, blah, blah. And you say, you're breaking hiring laws. Okay, now you weren't trying to be deceptive here. I think you just made a mistake. You do realize that when Lucasfilm does a casting call for female actresses to play Princess Leia's daughter, that's okay. You do know, right, that as content producers, you're allowed to have roles on your show, male and female, and child, older, whatever. You're even allowed to define race if you want for your show. Our show had a role for a female host, and therefore we casted for a female host. And that in no way, like when Mary Hart retires from Entertainment Tonight and they hire a female host to replace her, they are allowed to cast and search for a female host to replace her. That is the role defined for the show, and that's allowed. So, I mean, you're incorrect there. I didn't break any hiring practices. And one of the things here, too, is that I've always believed that women roles have been drastically underrepresented in the movie journalism, movie blog sphere. As a matter of fact, going back a couple years, before I took over, some of you are familiar with the Masters of the Web panel at Comic-Con that I run, but I didn't always run it. It was around and running long before I took it over. But the thing was, before I took it over, never once, and this was important to me, had a woman been invited to be on the Masters of the Web panel. Now, for those of you who don't know what it is, Masters of the Web is when you get all these big webmasters and movie bloggers and things like that from the web to sit on a panel and talk about movies and movie blogging and things like that. And when I had taken over Masters of the Web, no woman had ever been allowed or invited to sit on that panel. And the year after I took it over, I said, we're going to change that because women need to be represented here. They are drastically underrepresented. And so I invited my friend Jen Yamato, who at the time was the senior editor of Rotten Tomatoes, and now she's at Deadline. I invited her to come and sit on the panel. And I was really happy that she accepted, and she became the first woman ever to sit on a panel. And I made a commitment that year at the panel. I said, next year, we're going to have half of our panel will be women. And I think the next year, the number of panelists was 7. So it was an odd number. And I think I had 4 men. I think I had 3 women. So it was just under half, but it was an odd number. So I came close. I believe women need to be represented in these types of things. You know, on the show, there's me, there's Dennis, there's Schnepp. I want to make sure that there's always female voices in our show. And I thought the role of the host was best for a female. I believe there are more women who come into LA training and looking to be hosts as opposed to actors or actresses. And so I wanted to be a female role. And that's what I did. And it is having a female role on a show is not illegal. I didn't break any laws. I wouldn't break the law. And if I did break the law, I would have been punished. So no, you're incorrect that I went out and broke some kind of law. Let's see. And here's one of the big things, dude. Your article's a little self-contradictory. In one breath, first of all, AMC Theaters never has ever asked me to say something positive about a movie that I don't believe in or that I don't really like, or to say something I don't actually believe. They've never asked me, and that's why I'm still here. Because they've never asked me to do that, because they know if they did, I would quit. But they've got too much integrity for that. Now, you call me a liar in your article, saying that's not true. Well, actually, it is true. That's the fact. That is the fact. It's the truth. You say that's not true because, and then you go on saying that, I might be paraphrasing here, saying that I only pump films, and the only reason I do the show is to pump up films, and sometimes I sound like a used car salesman. Maybe you didn't say used car salesman, but it was something like that. You know what I'm talking about. So you're basically saying I do nothing. I'm just there to be a puppet and to be just say nothing but positive things about movies that are coming up. Okay. But in the same article, a little bit later, you chastise me. You slap me on the wrist for talking negatively about an upcoming film. Because, I'm terribly negative on the whole Gal Gadot casting as Wonder Woman. And I've tweeted about it and I've Facebooked about it, that I think it's just terrible. I think it's a terrible decision. That's my opinion. Hopefully it turns out I'm wrong and she's going to knock it out of the park as Wonder Woman. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. But for right now, my reaction is I think it's a terrible decision. And I wrote that. But you chastise me for talking negative. You say, yeah, Warner Brothers is going to know about that. I was sitting with the reps of Warner Brothers 2 days ago. I mean, trust me, Warner Brothers knows how this whole thing works. They expect us to be honest, so that when I come out of, if I wasn't honest, all right, about when I feel negative about movies, then nobody would believe me when I speak positively about movies. If I'm not honest about my opinion when I say I think the Gal Gadot hiring as Wonder Woman is a terrible, terrible move, then why would you believe me when I'm talking about another Warner Brothers film, The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, which is one of my favorite films of the year. The embargo's done, so I'm allowed to say that now. If I wasn't honest about the negativity, then nobody should have any reason to believe me about my positivity. And Warner Brothers understands that. Everybody understands that. So I just found it funny that in the exact same article, you're chastising me saying all I do is just pump up and promote and speak great things about films. And then a little later, you chastise me for talking negatively about a film. What do I do? I'm stuck. Look, it's clear that Cameron, you don't like me, and that's okay. I'm not for everybody. Heaven knows, I don't even know my wife stays with me. I'm not for everybody. And that's the great thing about the movie world online right now is we got websites like mine, we got websites like yours, we got websites like Coming Soon or Latino Review or Hit Fix, or we get lots of great diverse voices and options out there. And you don't have to be for everybody. And I know I'm certainly not for everybody, and there's nothing wrong with you just because you got a problem with me. There's nothing wrong with that, because obviously I'm not for you. I only take issue with the things that you say that are factually wrong about me. Like, hey, you don't like the fact that we talk about certain types of movies instead of other types of movies on my show. Totally fair criticism. That's my choice, but totally fair criticism. You don't like the fact that I talk this way. You don't like the fact that I talk that way. All totally fair. You're allowed to have those opinions, and I encourage you to have those opinions. But when it comes to things like writing sensationalized headlines, John Campea costs Jaimie Alexander the role of Wonder Woman, factually incorrect. That you're saying things, John shares privileged information, factually incorrect. When you're saying things, John ousted his own staff person, factually incorrect. John fired a staff person because she disagreed with him about a movie, factually incorrect. I just take issue with those things. So I'm just putting this together because I know there were some people who've been tweeting me and wanted me to do a little bit of response, and so I am. I commend you, Cameron, for having a feeling about something and wanting to write about it. I wish more people would actually, even though I had some problems with what you wrote, I wish more people would actually sit down and commit the type of time you clearly committed to thinking through and writing. Look, I may have a problem with a number of things you said, and I think some of the things you said were factually incorrect, but you clearly put a lot of thought into that article, and I think it was actually very well written. It was actually a pleasure to read. I'm reading this. It's like, yeah, I hate the fact that he said that, but damn it, it's a pleasure to read this article. I think you did a great job, and I wish more people would do what you did. And instead of just, so many of us online, including me, guilty, can just get online and just rant. It's like, oh, this is effing stupid or blah, 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 blah. But you know what? When you do what you did and you actually sit down and you think it through and you write it down, maybe you'll be wrong. But I think it adds more to the movie-going community when you actually present something really thought out and you present something that, look, I thought this through. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but at least I'm presenting something that I'm not just whipping together. I thought this through. And I really liked your article. I think, as far as how well it was written, I think it was a very well-written article. And that's why I celebrate that there are sites like yours, sites like all the other sites we mentioned out there. There are different voices because as film fans, we're all completely different, and that means we'll respond to different voices differently. I have some people who respond to my voice online. You have some people that respond to your voice online. Most important thing, though, is that we're all film fans. So that will do it for my little video blog. Thanks a lot for listening to me rant and ramble and whatnot. Keep being movie fans. Keep liking things. Keep disliking things. Whatever. That's what is the root of our passion as film fans. So until next time, my name is John Campea.